But the guy that's coming on next, the guy that's in the on-deck circle, he probably has the answers. He is a college baseball analyst, friend of the show, regular guest of the show, a reoccurring guest of the show. We became good friends over some water on the rocks in Omaha. Yeah, it was a great time. Looking forward to having our baseball conversations again. Welcome, Mike Rooney, back to the show. Appreciate you, Mike.
Gentlemen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I can hear you great. You sound glorious. Can you hear us?
Yeah, yes, and I think it was fair. Reoccurring. I'm not a friend yet. Like, I got to earn friends.
No, you're a friend. You're definitely a friend. I think you've earned that. I think, listen, when you break bread in Omaha together and you start, you have a couple drinks together, I think that qualifies as becoming friends.
That's the first test.
Now, I consider you a friend. I don't know if you consider me a friend.
Love where your head's at.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, college baseball down here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana is always exciting. We are looking forward to this season. Obviously, it's going to look a little different on LSU side. I think they're just as talented, just in a different way. You have a lot more experience around the college baseball landscape as far as scouting and looking at different types of teams. How does LSU compare? I know they're ranked number 4 in D1 baseball's top 25, but how do they compare to the rest of the schools in college baseball?
Well, I think for us at D1, we spent a ton of time. Wake Forest was kind of like the sexy number 1, right? Like it was hard to walk away from them. The number 2 team we went round and round on LSU, Florida, and Arkansas. It just felt like we were, for half an hour, we'd be on LSU, then we'd be in Arkansas, then we just all over the place. I think for LSU, the roster is crazy talented. You could argue it's deeper than last year, but when I knew I was going to talk to you guys, the 6 dudes that LSU lost, to me, like, there's a tough-mindedness in this group. There's like a winner in this group that, it's important. I wrote down Riley Cooper, Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, Jordan Thompson, Cade Beloso, Gavin Dugas. Those are hyper competitive dudes. So I'm not worried at all about LSU's talent. It's just like, how does this whole team come together?
Right. And I think for us, the big question mark is the pitching staff, to me, is deeper than – you don't have a Paul Skeens, right? Obviously, you don't get Paul Skeens very often in college baseball, if ever. But you have – in my mind, you have a deeper pitching staff. You have a deeper rotation. You have the ability to throw 3-4 guys maybe in the rotation. Whereas last year you felt like you had your 3 and then a couple guys got hurt and you had to kind of mix and match. But the offense was – you knew that you were going to score 8-9 runs a game. This year, I think the offense is going to be good, but I think it's going to take a little time for them to figure it out. Is that kind of what y'all are feeling over there at D1 baseball too? Is you have a talented offense, but a little bit of an unproven lineup?
Yeah, I think that's really fair. It's the pitching is. I think the pitching, like Skeens, like you said, Mikie, like no Skeens is a huge deal, right? Like that's the best pitching performance we've seen in 10 years, easy. So that's like no one's replacing that. But there's so much depth,
Right.
There, like if somebody doesn't pan out, there's a million other places Jay can go. The other part of it, though, is the position player group is very talented. It's just really unproven. The one concern, like the infield is a concern. I thought last year's infield defense was probably the weakest part of the team outside of Trey Morgan. And this year's infield defense will be even more of a question mark.
Right.
But again, there's so much talent on the roster. Am I calling any of these big concerns? No, not at all. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Mike, so before we get back into this LSU team and or back into the conference, I kind of want to talk about what's returning or what is new on this Wake Forest team? Because I would imagine that a lot of LSU fans will use that as the measuring test, and they will look at that team and what they're doing all season and who's on that team and how it's going for them. So what do they have returning, and what's new to that team that's supposed to make them, that's putting them over the top right now?
I think it's a good question. I think with Wake Forest, if you're a Wake Forest believer, you would start and say, hey, that's the best rotation in the country. So the Hartle kid, the lefty with the cutter, is going to be a first-round pick. Michael Massey, the right-hander, he was their Sunday guy. I mean, it's like his swing and miss with the fastball is double the national average. And then Chase Burns is the third starter. So you'd say, okay, elite rotation. Then you'd say Nick Kurtz, the first baseman, is a Golden Spikes candidate, another first-round pick. And then the Seaver King kid, who is a Division II transfer, I get it, but he was arguably the best player on Team USA last summer. So I think Wake Forest depth is, I don't feel super comfortable with it, to be honest. I don't, maybe they are deep, but I just don't know who the players are. But the top end of their roster is really exceptional.
So I want to get back to Chase Burns. You mentioned he obviously transfers from Tennessee to Wake Forest. He had some electric moments at Tennessee early in the season as a starter, and they moved him out of the rotation to the closer role, and he excelled in that role. And I guess, I don't know the details of it, but I would assume that whenever they had their meetings at the end of the year and moving forward, they told him, hey, we like you more as a reliever. He wanted to be a starter, puts his name in the portal, ends up at Wake Forest. Why do you think they felt he was better suited out the bullpen? Is it because he only had two elite pitches and not a third? Was it control issues? Like I said, you have a lot more experience scouting these guys than I do, as far as, you watch them a lot more. What do you think is the reason that Tennessee thought he was maybe a closer and not a starter?
Yeah, I think – I don't know that Tennessee felt – and again, I'm speculating just like you would be. Unfair for me to speak for Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson, but I think it's fun to speculate.
Yeah, right. That's what we're supposed to do, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's what we're here for. It's make decisions that don't count. It's right. The best part. Yeah. So I would say, but to your point, like Burns was a two-pitch guy last year, and he was a two-pitch guy his freshman year. He's really the same guy. He's a good strike thrower. His walk percentage is 7%. 10% is the national average. His strikeout percentage is outrageous. It was 30% as a freshman, 38% last year, 20% is the average. So, the stuff is my guess on this is that Chase Burns, it wasn't about starter versus reliever. It was more the Tennessee pitching program is more old school and obviously works.
Right.
The Wake Forest pitching program is super modern and obviously works. I just think that Chase Burns and his team, if you will, probably felt like, hey, we're doing fine, but we're not like making big jumps. We should maybe try something else because there's big dollars on the line if you're Chase Burns.
Right.
Mike, Hurd, Holman, jump. Now, we're going to go back to being assumptions, and we're here to assume, and that's what's going to be the rotation to start. Do you see? Oh, yeah, don't mind that. Anyway, do you see at the end of the year, like realistically see, because we all know things happen differently once they, really start this thing, the first pitch is thrown, then the season really starts and you start playing real baseball. Do you see that being that 3 ending to the end of the season as the Rican rotation for LSU this year?
Oh, man. I think if I was going to put odds on it, Mitch, I think Hurd's going pole to pole. I'm all in on Thatcher Hurd.
Me too.
He was amazing as a freshman at UCLA, all over the place last year for you all. But, his last start was 6 innings for the national title, right? He's extremely talented. I just think he's a really thoughtful, bright kid. I think he's ready to have a monster year. I think Holman is super pitchable. If he's healthy, he's pole to pole. Gage Jump is the one that I think is, he hasn't thrown in 2 years. He was a big-time recruit on the West Coast. He's clearly extremely talented. But if we want him to throw 120 innings this year, that feels a little wishful. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he can do that, but he's just barely thrown. It won't be a talent issue with Gage Jump. I just don't know how you would do that having not really pitched that much in college.
Such a great point, because we really don't know what's in the tank, right? Like you said, he goes from playing a year and then having almost 2 years off. Asking him to be able to be healthy and go a whole year does, if you just think of it in that little vacuum, you're like, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, now the good news for LSU is they got like 27 other options.
Well, that was gonna be my question to you.
Yeah,
Cam
like, Johnson would be the Friday night guy at 200 schools.
No doubt, he may be the number 1 overall pick in 3 years, and he's not. He doesn't have the rotation spot right now. And that was gonna be my next question: if Gage Jump or any of these other guys, because last year they were super talented. They had a bunch of talented pitchers. But then you started seeing some guys go down. They had to figure out, okay, who's going to take over those roles. And I think it took them a little bit because they kind of went through that little bumpy road right before the SEC tournament and before the end of the season. And they had to figure out, okay, who was going to step up. And that happened in the postseason. This year, I don't think you have that issue. I think you have a lot of guys that Jay is very comfortable in throwing into that rotation. Who are some guys that you're excited to see maybe jump in that spot or have some meaningful innings being thrown for LSU?
Yeah, I think Johnson I'm super curious about, right? Like, to get a left-handed kid who's 6'5", who's upper 90s or, touches upper 90s, like, that's like seeing Bigfoot in college baseball, right? Like, you don't see that. Like, those kids are first rounders out of high school. So I can't wait to see him. The bullpen is like, if Cade Woods, the best version of him is lights out. Guidry's the guy that you always believe is going to get those. Guidry's so trustable. The breaking ball's awesome. Herring, Lore, the kid from Xavier who just tore up that regional last year. Ackenhausen. I mean, there's so many options. That Shores and Newt. What if they come back and can give some innings this year? So that's the X factor for LSU this year. There's so much pitching talent on that roster. There's really they're going to be a handful to score against.
And that's kind of brings me into my next conversation is about the SEC in general, right? 6 of the top 10 of D1's preseason rankings are SEC teams. 3 of the top 4 are SEC teams. SEC obviously is a very, very powerful conference in college baseball. Any given team, and I feel like in that conference, can win. What do you expect to see through conference play? Because LSU is ranked number 4. They may not win the SEC, but they may be the best team in the SEC. It's just a very tough conference to navigate through. Who do you like in the conference, and who do you like to maybe that nobody else is really talking about?
Yeah, there's like everyone's talking about everybody in the SEC, right? Like it's it's like finding a sleeper on Times Square in New York City. I wouldn't pick LSU because I typically don't personally. I don't like to pick repeat. To go back to back is so. But they're going to be in the mix. Like I think LSU will be a factor in this thing. If you made me pick somebody, Arkansas and Tennessee are really intriguing to me. Now they're the 2 teams that haven't won these last 5 national titles, right? So I tend to gravitate towards those teams. Florida is so talented. They're kind of like LSU. Like, I'm a little uncertain about some of the structure of the team, but when your roster looks like that, of course I'm betting on that. But I guess like my pseudo sleeper to win the whole thing, Tennessee's offense is so overwhelming, and Arkansas pitching, I think Hagen Smith is going to have a monster year. I like both of those teams a lot.
Let me ask you about this team, and we have a kind of a vested interest because one of our best friends is the assistant there, and that's A&M. A&M, I think, came in the last year with some really high hopes, and I think they underachieved a little bit. They had a veteran team. They didn't really do the things they really wanted to. They're coming in this season with even higher hopes, ranked in the preseason top 10. I think they're ranked 8th. and they get one of maybe the biggest transfer in the country from Stanford to go and play there. They have Jace, is it Laviolette? However say his last name.
Laviolette, yeah.
Laviolette, and he is, he did what he did as a freshman. He's coming back for another year. It's, they seem like they have a lot of talent. They seem like they have a lot of hype behind them. What can we expect from them?
Yeah, they're going to be in the mix. That's what you can expect for sure. They have pitching question marks, of course. They have a new pitching coach. So, is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? It's hard to say. They certainly have pitching talent. They're very left-handed on the mound, plenty of arm strength. But I think their lineup is going to be ferocious. And you think about Laviolette is a 6'6" center fielder. Yeah. He could hit 20 home runs and steal 30 bags. He is a dynamic player. And then you've got Braden Montgomery, who's been basically an All-American for 2 years. And then they have this freshman, Gavin Grahovic. I haven't seen him with my own eyes, but it sounds like Pat the Bat Burrell version 2.0. This massive California kid who just rakes at a little bit positionless. So, Laviolette, Montgomery, Grahovic, that's going to be a nightmare. I would imagine all three of those kids are going 20-plus home runs.
Wow.
So, if A&M figures that on the mound, which I would imagine they'll figure something out, we know they're going to score runs.
With all these powerhouses, especially in the SEC, and how it's very, very, very – I wouldn't even say top-loaded. There's just a whole bunch of really good teams. Is there any room for anybody else in the SEC to kind of sneak up and get into the race that's not being talked about right now?
Well, it's a great question, Mitch, because Kentucky was 16-14 last year, hosted a regional, won that regional, came to your all super regional. So we like Kentucky's roster. It's a unique style of play that looks sustainable, but 16-14 is pretty fragile, right?
Right.
Yep.
Especially given that assumes the two Mississippi schools are just going to be bad again, which I don't think is going to be the case. Now that said, Ole Miss already's got some big injuries, and then I don't know, Mississippi State kind of in a 2-year slump here. It's just vintage SEC. If you look closely at Georgia's roster, there's things you're going to like. There's things you're going to really, really like. And then Mizzou is going to be very athletic. And I love what Carrick Jackson's trying to do there. But as you all know, in this league, somebody is going to have to lose these games. Alabama, if you take the top 5 arms at Alabama, those dudes are outrageously talented. I don't know, man. Somebody's got to slip and somebody's got to lose the games.
I agree, and it's always like that. I feel like it's always is like that. And I feel like there's always going to be a team that's supposed to be really good that ends up not playing great. Ole Miss last year. I feel like there's going to be a team that's not supposed to be good that ends up playing great. And I guess Kentucky could have been that team last year as well. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I'm excited that baseball season's here. I know you're excited that baseball season's. Are we going to get the privilege of seeing you at the box at all this year? Do you have any plans?
Well, Mike, I don't know if you're aware of this, but for ESPN, only the A and B crew gets to go to the box. That's Kyle Peterson, Berkey, Chris Bird. So I'll be at the Missouri Valley and the Big West and all. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if I'll get to go to the box in the spring, but I certainly will be all over the LSU Tigers as we get down to the postseason and squeeze play and all that stuff. So if I get the assignment, you'll be the first to know.
I love that. I hope you get it. I hope I get to see you. If not, hopefully we're back in Omaha. We'll get to see you out there in Omaha again. Now that it's baseball season, I'm sure we'll see a lot more of you hopefully on this show. We always love our conversations with you. You're the best. I appreciate you. And enjoy the rest of your Monday. And, again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You got it, fellas. Be good.
You
Talk
too.
to you soon.
Appreciate you.